Welcome to CMO Confidential, the podcast that takes you inside the drama, decisions, and choices that go with being the head of marketing. Hosted by five-time CMO Mike Linton.
Welcome, marketers, advertisers, and those who love them to Chief Marketing Officer Confidential. CMO Confidential is a program that takes you inside the drama, the decisions, and the politics that go with being the head of marketing in what is one of the most scrutinized jobs in the executive suite. I'm Mike Linton, the former Chief Marketing Officer of Best Buy, eBay, Farmers Insurance, and Ancestry.com, here with my guest, Nancy Zwiers. Nancy Zwiers was previously the Chief Marketing Officer of Spinmaster, the makers of Paw Patrol. Don't laugh, that's $8 billion in sales since its launched, and Hatchimals, which created a craze during its 2016 launch. Previously, she was the SVP of Worldwide Marketing on Barbie and the General Manager of the Girls Division. She also had her own company called Funosophy, which I always have trouble saying, which specialized in youth and play. In short, Nancy probably knows toys and fun better than any adult you know. Welcome, Nancy.
Oh, good to be here, Mike.
So today's topic, why is marketing innovation so freaking hard? And here's the setup. The Chief Marketing Officer seat is by far the fastest churning seat in the executive level. And one of the main challenges is the need to innovate in an environment where everyone has an opinion. Financial pressures are enormous. And there's often at least one peer, and often more, that thinks that innovation is not going to work. I want our listeners to imagine what that's like in toys, where the bets are bigger and more judgment-oriented than most industries. Nancy, tell us how innovation works in the toy business and start by dimensionalizing the industry a little bit.
Okay, well, it's a big business, about $100 billion worldwide every year.
That's a lot of fun, isn't it? $100 billion in
lots
fun.
Of play. And it's very high stakes because about 2/3 of the business happen in the fourth quarter of each year. And you don't have a lot of time to optimize once you launch because there's no pushing Christmas back to January or February. So you're really kind of laying down your bet and you got to live with it. To make things even more challenging, most products, almost all products in the advertised toy business have a lifespan of 6 to 12 months. So you're doing this over and over again. And besides the fact that you're launching new products, you don't really know what products your competition is launching. So it's full of unknowns, and you have to really start learning how to trust your gut.
So this is a series of bets that you as the CMO or the head of these really cool divisions, you're going to make all these bets like in sequence. And you're going to have bets lined up, I guess, for a couple of years, right? That is a huge amount of judgment and a huge amount of betting, if you will. How do you keep those ideas and then track how they're doing and then manage the company to get them out all at once? Like, what's the secret here on managing that pipeline?
Well, pipeline is the right word, Mike. We create, most big companies create a 3-year pipeline, and we create a strategic framework for the the next 3 years out. And you start by creating what we call a strategic objective for a product, and then we start developing concepts to that meet that strategic objective. The biggest companies, the most sophisticated, do some concept testing, but again, you can't really test against the competition. So you're just trying to weed out the less optimal concepts. I would say that if we could do even more research with consumers, we would minimize some of the judgment, but there isn't enough money and there isn't enough time to do that. So the best people who are most successful in this industry really practice pattern recognition, kind of not unlike a chess player does. And you start recognizing patterns, and then that starts informing your gut. And then the more times you're right, the more you trust your gut. And so it becomes this virtuous circle of being able to advocate for your ideas in the absence of objective information that everybody can agree on.
Hey, Nancy, give us an example of your pattern recognition in your career. We'll talk about one that worked, and then later we'll talk about when your gut took you the wrong way. But give us a good example of pattern recognition and then how that produced a product.
Okay. Well, I had the opportunity of working on Barbie. We sold about 125 million units every year.
125 million Barbies a year.
Yes, 125
Wow.
million a year. And with that kind of volume, you have the benefit of being able to pick up on patterns. So we learned that young girls, like ages 3 to 6, were different than older girls, ages, say, 7 to 8, 9. And so we started segmenting the business that way. We noticed that, there are core play patterns. Girls like to play, with hair. They like to play with fashion. We noticed that there were themes that were proven year in and year out to be the big themes. Like we always had a bathing suit Barbie. We always had a glamour Barbie. Pop star was a great theme. So we leaned into the things that worked. And amazingly, children play around the world the same. So we pretty much figured out that play is a biological drive. It transcends time, geography, culture. And so once you start learning what those play drives, how they manifest, you can really stay true to that, but then find different ways to deliver on those core play patterns. It's really fascinating.
So here you have a ton of data because you have Barbie over the course of, years and years and years, and you have so many data points that you can make it work. Tell us about a time where you had to bet on your gut where you didn't have so much data.
So, one thing I will say is that when I got on Barbie, it was represented about 80% of Mattel's profits. So it really covered all the other businesses, and it was high stakes for Mattel. And so there was a lot of higher ups involved, and I wanted a little bit more independence. So I picked a segment of Barbie called Collector Barbie, where we sold these dolls to adults who loved Barbie, were passionate about Barbie. And at the time that I identified it as kind of my playground to kind of have a little bit of unfettered decision making, it was $6 million, which was less than 1% of the total revenue of the brand. And so we were in uncharted territory for figuring out how to grow that business. And what I realized, and the way I framed the opportunity, is that there were 28 million women between the ages of blank and blank that grew up playing with Barbie. And so we had a chance to develop a casual collector segment. That was just a gut feel that there would be a market there. But lo and behold, we started, instead of selling $500 dolls and $1,000 dolls, targeted to the real, avid collectors. Yeah. We started selling $100 dolls and $150 dolls, and the business skyrocketed. We grew it from like 6 million to 175 million within 3 years, and not to speak of 70% operating profit. Whoa, that made a difference.
That's some serious money. Hey, so for our listeners, Nancy and I started a P&G longer ago that we're going to share. But Nancy, I think it'd be really interesting for our listeners to draw a parallel, not a parallel, but a difference between how consumer testing and consumer research worked at a company like P&G or like a Pepsi or Lever or whatever you want to say, and then how it works at toys. And then we'll talk about how hard is it to get it through the system, because it's hard to get it through the system in both places. But give us take that and run it anywhere you want with it.
Okay. Well, to just take a quick tangent, P&G cared about innovation. They asked me in my interview, give us an example of when you innovated. I was a college student at the time. And so my example was, I threw this red party and everyone came dressed up in red and everyone had red cups and we had red lights. And frankly, I'm kind of surprised I got the job with that as my example.
I will just move us along from right here. So you get that, and then you're at P&G. So you get at Procter, you have time to test, and you're going to test it until it's right. In toys, you obviously don't have time to test. Tell us, go into our listeners, if they wanted to go into toys, how would they innovate, or what lessons from toys innovation can you bring to our listeners out here? You mentioned your gut and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So let people in on this.
Okay, so in terms of research, one interesting thing is that almost all of our research dollars is spent on measuring our success or our ability and our success in creating desire. Almost none of the research is done to prove out the play value of the product because all the samples are handmade.
Hey, just one question. What does desire look like in research?
Children choose it. They can't tell you why they like it. You can't ask kids questions like, why do you like it? Oh, because it's fun. Why is it fun? Oh, because it looks fun. So you have to base it on what they choose.
Wait, so you're saying you can't give them a 10-point scale and say on a scale from 1 to 10 with this, you can't do that. You just have to put them in a room and let them pick.
Yeah, either put them in a room, or sometimes it's sometimes it became online. But we put stuff in the table in in a focus group. We put some early concepts, prototypes on the table, and then we'd see what kids would reach for. And whatever they reached for, it was kind of a guide to what they were most intrigued by. So you really have to always test versus a relevant competitive set and then measure what they go for. You can't ever test something by itself.
Any good story on this where you had an aha moment when you're testing with these kids that you want to share with our listeners? Because you did, I always say it wrong, Hatchimals and some other stuff. So it's fabulously interesting work that you did.
The story that comes to my mind is that we used to say with little girls, there's no such thing as too much sparkle. And I remember that we had these concept boards where we were trying to get some feedback on different approaches to something. And the concept boards had glitter. And the glitter on the concept boards fell down into the carpet. And when we had the moderator leave the room, the girls got down on their hands and knees and were picking glitter out of the carpet, grain by grain. So that was pretty funny. Wow. I would say that there were times when research told us, no, girls don't like this. Barbie walking, for example. We created a walking Barbie, and top management said, you know what? I don't care what the research says. We're going to do talking or walking Barbie. And in that particular case, it didn't really work very well. The product didn't work very well. But then the flip side was true too. There were times when girls said they didn't like it, but then when it got out in the marketplace and they saw that there was some, older girls that liked it, they would follow suit. And so we couldn't even really 100% trust the research. The research was guided our decision, but we couldn't just take it to the bank each time.
Let's move this along to the, one of the things about innovation is everyone has an opinion, but there's not that many people that actually are accountable for it. You as the CMO are almost always going to be accountable for a lot of it and also for the results. Tell us about how, best practices you have for getting innovation through a company, especially where there's so much judgment involved in something like toys.
Okay, so let me just give an example of when we stood firm on our belief in something. We were about to launch Hatchimals. It was a huge launch for the company, and we developed a unique approach to the advertising. We included, kind of in a case of lateral thinking, I had worked on Cabbage Patch. And I remember when Cabbage Patch was huge in the 80s, studying the research, they had included the whole family in the adoption, experience of Cabbage Patch. So the hatching of Hatchimals took about, 30, 40 minutes when we first launched. And so we included mom and dad in the commercial. Normally it's just kids. And an industry heavyweight saw the commercial and was talking to the co-CEO of the company. And he said, that commercial is a disaster. And about a month before launch, they told us to reshoot the commercial because it was a disaster. And we said, no, we believe in it. And we stood firm. We gathered up some allies in the form of the head of sales and the head of research. And we said, nope, we're going to stick with it. And it ended up being phenomenal. So that's just an example of how sometimes you have to gird your loins and stick to your guns and push through against the objections of people who have more position power than you do.
So one thing, Hatchimals, tell everybody what it is, because it's a 30-minute hatch I think our listeners, some of them may not have purchased the Hatchimals or however you say it. So please fill that in. And then also the inclusion of the adults in the advertising. Why was that such a big deal? So tell us a little more about this story.
Okay, so Hatchimals was an amazingly innovative product. It was a big egg, and the child, when you take it out of the package, it automatically activated a mechanism that took about 30 minutes to unfold. And the child would manipulate the egg, and the gradual process would unfurl. In the case of like eyes would light up, you could see it through the shell, and then you'd hear some little chirping sounds through the shell, and eventually you see that first crack, and then pretty soon more cracks, and you see the little beak coming out, and the egg literally hatches magically through your love and care. Your love makes it hatch. It was so innovative that the retail trade wanted huge launch quantities, and we couldn't put it on the shelf when normally holiday products hit the shelf in August. The earliest we could do it was in October. So we created, in an unusual move, borrowing from my experience in computer games, video games, we created a street date in October. Prior to that, we had a teaser campaign where we showed the first part of the hatch and then the second part of the hatch. And then on Hatch Day, we unveiled a 60-second commercial, which is unheard of these days. And we showed the complete hatching with lots of kids and mom and dad. We had dad filming with his phone to capture it on camera to, kind of model sharing on social media. And part of the reason why we chose to include the family is that the child loves to be the center of attention in their family. And this is a case where the little girl or boy who's receiving the product, it was their product, they got to be the center of attention of the entire family. And there's not that many toys that really allow for that. So we decided to capitalize on that consumer insight. We also concentrated so many of our dollars in October. Normally you spread out your dollars between November and December. And we put so much money into those first 2 weeks of October, we literally didn't have to advertise for the balance of the holiday season. The product just flew off the shelves. People were lining up around stores at 4 a.m. to get their Hatchimals for Christmas for their children or Hanukkah. And it was just like an incredible experience that helped create a 3-year period where Spinmaster, the company, really had record revenue and record profits because we kept being able to milk that incredible vitality that we created in October of 16.
Nice. That is a great story. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say you are an expert in innovation and getting innovation through companies. Two kind of questions at once. How do you know a company is really committed to innovation? Because every company says they are, but a whole bunch of them aren't really. They will actually round off every innovation edge and produce the dullest possible stuff. So how do you know a company's committed to it? And then two, even in an innovative company, a lot of people don't like the innovation. How do you manage it? So how do you pick the company, and then how do you manage it?
Okay, so when I joined Spinmaster, I was super excited because it is widely known as one of the most innovative, if not the most innovative companies in the industry. And they had a track record of making big bets. So you can kind of tell if a company is really sticking their neck out and making big bets that they prize innovation. Within the management structure, do they punish failure? Do they celebrate failure? At Spinmaster, people would, literally hold up failures and celebrate them because at least someone tried to do something unique, even if it didn't work. McKinsey's study shows that the biggest obstacle to innovation is fear of a negative impact on your career if it fails, and fear of the uncertainty. And so in addition to you kind of developing your own, sense of courage and trusting your gut, you also look for management that is willing to create space for innovation, willing to fund innovation. Let's face it, giving birth is messy and painful. And so is innovation. It's not a clear-cut road. So one of the things you want to look for is companies really celebrating innovation, celebrating failed innovation, and not punishing people for trying new things that didn't work.
So when you're interviewing, is there a single question you ask that the answer to that innovation question is binary for you? Like, I won't take the job if the answer wrong.
One ways that the analysts evaluate innovation is what percentage of your sales come from products that have been launched in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
And so that's a real, objective measure. But asking them what's the last big innovation you launched, whether it was a marketing program, whether it was a product, and how did that unfold, and really, kind of assess the impact. I don't want to leave this conversation without asking you about how you, in your CMO role at Best Buy, a retailer known for appliances, how you really got them to start thinking about the music industry, and which created a whole halo around Best Buy. I'd love for your listeners to hear this story because it's amazing.
Well, thank you. I had a great group of peers, and one of those peers was the head merchant, and he totally supported the long-term vision of building the business and actually into a consumer function. Two, the guy that ran music and movies was really into it. And he and I hatched a bunch of ideas that the company supported, including, we had a deal with the Rolling Stones and everybody, and we had a trading desk. And at the time, the company did celebrate failures, took risks. And it was not really an appliance company. It was a technology company, but it had training in the business. As technology came out, you had to take it or not. You couldn't say, this Pentium chip, we're going to watch it for a year, or all the digital stuff, we're going to watch it for a year. You took it or you didn't. And the company applied that to everything at the time. And so that's how we got Reward Zone, the loyalty program, going, the trading desk where we traded marketing for exclusive music content and everything else. But without the peers and without the company culture, and without also at the time, the Best Buy was really into take the don't be crazy, but take risks when you can. And so that's how it worked. A lot of companies say they want to take that risk, but as soon as they see the potential bill, not even the real bill, the potential bill, they won't take it. And the other thing I will say that about innovation that is at least super important to me, and I will ask it in the interview question, if you have to have a perfect forecast for an innovation, like if the CFO and everybody are pounding you for exactly what you're going to sell for an innovation, it is not an innovation. It is a known entity. And I will tear apart how the company does that, because if they are forecasting down to, if you have to spend like 2 days on the forecast and get it right for something that is a true innovation, it's going to be killed by the company if it doesn't do exactly what the forecast says, even though you're making that entire plan up. And the Best Buy did not make us do that. They thought, are you close or not? And then we did it. So thank you for that question. I know we could keep talking a long time, and maybe we will do another show. I would love to take this back to your funniest or favorite story that you want to share that you haven't shared so far.
Well, actually, my funniest story was really not about me. It was about over 20 years ago. I had the opportunity to hear the inventor of Post-it notes speak. And he talked about that invention. And I remember him saying, when he was talking, no one believed in this, faulty adhesive product. It didn't even stick properly. It was like a bust. And then he started noticing secretaries, assistants using it. And so then he talked to manufacturing. They go, you don't understand. This is really hard to manufacture. And he goes, great. That means that it'll be really hard to copy. And then he finished his talk by saying, before you're successful, people will call you stubborn. But after you're successful, people will call you tenacious. And nice. I just love that story.
And you don't want to tell any Proctor stories about innovation, do you? I think there's one.
Well, I will say one of the things that kind of put me over the top to make a decision that someone with my desire for creativity would not necessarily love staying at Procter for the long term, even though I prize my training that I got there, is that we were on Top Job. We were transitioning to a plastic tooled cap from a two-tone metal cap that we had been using for years. The two-tone metal cap was part orange and part green, and the plastic cap had to be one of those colors, green or orange. And we did months and months of testing to determine what it was going to be. And we got insight that it was the orange cap was the way to go. And then I had to go up the line and get everyone on board with the orange cap. And then we finally got to the divisional manager who had to give the final blessing. And he looked at it and he said, I think we should go with the green cap. And I was just like, oh my gosh. So that was like not really even an innovation, but it speaks to this idea of risk aversion and, dancing on the head of a pin instead of making big bets. And, having been in the toy industry for over 30 years, I have to say, for me, it was a great fit because it was like constantly swinging for the fences. And that's a lot of fun when you get to do that and when you're right more often than not.
Yes. Thank you for that story, because it also emphasizes a point about innovation, which if innovation is a democracy where everyone votes and every level votes, you will not really get any innovation. You will get a lot of inconsistency and dullness over time. So Nancy, last question for you before we wrap up. One piece of practical advice you would share with our listeners that we haven't talked about so far.
I think having a really, really deep understanding of consumer motivations and drawing strength of your convictions is key to innovation. it's not this blind bluster. You got to feel grounded in some kind of truth that gives credence to your gut feeling. And so I would say that is what my advice is start with a deep, deep insight of consumer motivations.
And can I summarize that by saying motivation with a direction, or innovation with a direction, versus just like, we're going to innovate, do whatever the heck you want?
Yeah.
Okay. Super.
Yeah. And the other thing I'll just say is pick your shots, because there's a couple conditions that really help you, get innovation across the finish line within a company. Whether it's a desperate situation where necessity is the mother of invention, whether it is you've got the strength behind you that you can afford to take some risks because everyone will come along with you. And then don't be afraid to have a broad foundation of experience where you can really draw from lateral thinking across different experiences and industries to say, oh, it worked here, maybe it'll work here. So those are some of the things that I've thought about that have helped me get proposed innovations across the finish line.
Well, thank you, Nancy. And thanks to everyone for listening to CMO Confidential. Look for our other shows on Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube, which include What Your Agency Wants to Tell You But Won't, How Your Creatives Really Wish You Would Run That Meeting, Is the CMO Position Headed for Extinction, and What Private Equity Really Thinks About Marketing. Nancy, thanks for joining us. All you marketers, stay safe out there. This is Mike Linton signing off for CMO Confidential.
This episode of CMO Confidential is produced and sponsored by AdCom, one of the premier integrated marketing and advertising agencies. AdCom works with mid-market companies to create measurable returns. With 30-plus years experience, AdCom partners to lead innovative strategy, creative, media, and analytics for growth-oriented brands that want to differentiate themselves in a crowded field. Working in B2B, B2C, healthcare, financial services, transportation, building products, and consumer goods, AdCom leverages unique internal and external insights to create dynamic and lasting brands ready to maximize their market position. For more information, visit us at engageadcom.com.
Great careers are forged out of great relationships. Your success, whatever your field, relies and thrives on the support and insights of others. I'm Andy Lapata, an author and speaker on the power of professional relationships. In the Connected Leadership podcast, I have the privilege of interviewing people from around the world to understand the relationships that have made a difference on their journey and how their insights can help you. From Nobel Prize winners to Olympians, from NASA astronauts to peace campaigners, my guests have shared some captivating moments from their lives and careers. Combined with experts from leading universities, cutting-edge authors and giants of business, the Connected Leadership podcast aims to inspire, educate and entertain.
Hi, my name is Sarah, and I want to tell you about my podcast called Can I Offer You Some Feedback? I'm a business consultant and executive coach with over 20 years experience in change management, leadership development, and naturally providing feedback to high performers. My podcast is for those of you who have a complicated relationship with feedback, whether giving, receiving, avoiding, or seeking. Feedback is essential for our development. In each episode, you'll hear from real people across industries with their ideas, perspectives, and best practices on feedback. I'll also be sharing business bites with you, simple explanations of organizational tools, management techniques, and leadership philosophies that will help you and your businesses thrive. You can listen to Can I Offer You Some Feedback on your favorite podcast app or learn more at evergreenpodcasts.com.